Thank you. Ms. Tenney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I see the ranking member is up there too, and thank you both for holding this hearing. And thank you, Commissioner. I know this is a long morning and afternoon for you. And I just want to jump into a couple of quick things. So, Commissioner Werfel, as Israel continues to fight the war that Hamas started with a vicious attack on civilians on October 7th, 2023, which includes the efforts to recover hostages that continue to be held underground in Gaza, disturbing demonstrations have swept through our college campuses and around our nation and here at home. Many of these demonstrations have been explicitly anti-Semitic, and some have called for the death of the Jewish people. This committee held a hearing in November where we heard from witnesses that explained how certain groups behind many of the events calling for violence against the Jewish people are funded through tax-exempt organizations. Multiple witnesses raised concerns that tax-exempt groups in the United States have ties to and may be providing material support to Hamas, a terrorist organization. Do you share my concern about the shocking rise of anti-Semitism on college campuses, particularly, and across our society?
Well, first, thank you for this question. It is a tough question and a tough issue. And I do share concerns. I find calls for hate, I find anti-Semitism, I find Islamophobia abhorrent, reprehensible, heartbreaking. As I put on my commissioner hat and run the process of determining whether an organization is exempt or whether an organization should be revoked of their exempt status, we have a process that we run. And what I want to make sure is that we run that process robustly and effectively to make sure the right outcome happens.
Right, I understand that. And also, along with my other Ways and Means colleagues, we sent you a letter along with Secretary Yellen, as you know, asking for a briefing on what the IRS and the Treasury are doing regarding the funding of anti-Semitism and particularly the funding of calls for violence against Jewish people and using tax-exempt organizations. And I understand that you are in the process of doing that and putting a briefing together for us.
Yes, that briefing is happening, yep.
Which we greatly appreciate. But do you share our concern that there could be money flowing, particularly potentially international money that we can't track, flowing to tax-free for these horrific purposes?
I want to make sure that exempt organizations are meeting their responsibility to operate for exempt purposes. And there are certain activities that could mean that their exempt purpose or their exempt activities should be revoked. Those typically orient around illegal activity. And what I want to make sure is that we have a very robust process in place. We get a lot of referrals. I want to make sure that we're running those referrals down and having a good assessment and a good process to figure out what the right outcome is.
Well, can you share with us any information about what the IRS and Treasury are doing about considering penalties, for example, revoking their tax-exempt status for these groups that are engaged in this kind of violent conduct? Obviously, many of these organizations and many of these so-called grassroots efforts look very astroturf. People have assets well beyond what they should have or could have possibly in a spontaneous way. What can we see in terms of taking that status away?
I think this is an important moment in time, Congresswoman, for the IRS, Treasury, and other federal agencies to come to this committee and others and lay out exactly what today's process is, what the current law and regulations say, and to determine whether we have both a sufficient framework and is it being implemented effectively. And that's a conversation that absolutely needs to happen right now.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And I want to just jump on one other topic that my colleague, Mr. Fitzpatrick, touched on. And that is, I have serious concerns about the direct file program. And my constituents fear, and I think rightly so, the IRS being the judge, jury, and executioner of their personal finances. Additionally, this program presents a clear conflict of interest, I believe, for the IRS, who should not be in charge of preparing taxes while performing other duties simultaneously, such as audits. And as you know, my home state of New York is already participating in this program. And another concern of mine is New York taxpayers could struggle to navigate between the two disparate systems and ultimately fail to file in the state or the federal. And I don't know, I want to know, what are you doing I know you only have a few seconds left, but what are we doing to address this issue and this potential problem, especially as we're seeing issues in New York State?
So we are certainly not preparing taxes. This is, you should let your constituents know. They are under no obligation to use this solution if they don't want to use this solution. We will determine through this pilot the pros and cons of such a solution, and I'll be back before this committee to report on that.
Thank you. We just want to make sure it doesn't become a mandate. Thanks so much. I appreciate your time today, and thank you so much for the response and also action on this really important issue with Israel and Hamas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kill.